Alright, hey everybody, welcome back once again. It's your girl Jasmine. So, I have not made a video for a while, so there's a lot that I want to update you guys on. And so today we're going to do a lesson, and then after I'll kind of do an update video. So, I encourage you guys to watch the update video so I can let you guys know exactly what's going on in my life and all the things that God's doing. So, I'm very excited. So today we're going to actually be talking about the power of a testimony. And I actually recently did a blog on, I did it on, like neglect. And I said, did Jesus neglect Lazarus? Because, he just, he knew he was sick, but he just let him die. So, if you think about, parents, if a parent knows that a child's sick and just allows them to be sick and then the child dies, in society they consider it as neglect. But we all know that Lazarus was risen back up from the dead. And so when we think about that, the power of his testimony saying that he was sick, Jesus allowed him to die, but then he rose back up. What power was in his testimony? A lot of the times when you hear a lot of preachers, or a lot of people, what they'll say is, if you don't know how to tell somebody about Jesus, tell them their testimony, what he's done for you. Because people, sometimes it can be hard to share the gospel, but if, everybody knows what God has done for them in their life, and you could say, hey, if God can do this for me, why couldn't he do it for you as well? So there's power in a testimony, no matter what your testimony is. So we're going to actually look at, of course, John 11 with Lazarus. But I wanted to look at Acts 26 and kind of look at Paul when he's talking to Agrippa. And so basically he was standing in front of him, and he was telling him his story of what had happened to him. So so right here, we're gonna start in verse 20, chapter 26. I'm gonna just continue on from verse 1. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, Thou art permitted to speak for thyself. Then Paul stretched forth his hands and answered for himself, I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews, especially because I know thee to be expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews, wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. So he wanted Agrippa to take the time to actually hear what it was that he was trying to say to him. So, there's you want people to be attentive and to actually hear what it is that you're trying to say to them about your testimony. Because, people can hear what you're saying. I hear what people are saying sometimes, but I don't actually hear what they're saying. So if you get what I'm saying, you can be like, oh, okay, yeah, I hear you, and it kind of go in one ear and out the other, and then, just carry on with life. But he wanted King Agrippa to hear what he was saying. He said, hear me patiently. So take your time to listen to what I'm saying. So when you are sharing your testimony, or, you want someone to hear the power of your testimony, you want them to hear you patiently. You want them to take the time to hear what it is that you're actually saying to them, so they can actually grasp it, so they can actually understand what it is that you're trying to say to them. This happened to me, and God did this for me, and he opened up this door and that door, because you're sharing. You don't want to rush through it. You want them to, hey, take your time, sit down, relax, and let me, sit here and tell you what God did for me in my personal life. It says, it continues, says, my manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among mine own nations at Jerusalem, know all the Jews, which knew me from the beginning, as they would testify. So everyone knew him and would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion I lived lived a Pharisee. So basically, Paul's telling him that his name was Saul, and basically everyone knew his reputation. They knew that he was once a Pharisee. He did not believe in God. Well, he believed in God, but Jesus Christ was not something that, Jesus kind of was showing them something new in which God wanted to show them, grace and mercy, and they were so stiff and set in their ways and their rules about how they believed that God was to be. But Christ came to set people free with love, and so he was basically saying, everyone knew who I was. I was a Pharisee, like the Pharisees, they were, God serving people, but did they follow Jesus? Or they followed Jesus? They spent most of the time when Jesus was alive trying to kill him and destroy him, and brought him to the cross. So it says, and now I stand, and I am judged for the hope of the promise made of God unto our fathers, unto which promise are 12 tribes instantly serving God day and night, hope to come. For which hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused of the Jews. Why should it be thought a thing incredible with you that God should raise the dead? I verily thought with myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth, which things I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priests, and when they were put to death, I gave my voice against them, and I punished them so often in every synagogue, and compelled them to blasphemy, and being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them even with the strangest cities. So basically, what he's doing is he's starting at the testimony with where he once was. So he's basically saying, I was once Saul, and I basically was killing Christians. I was locking them up. I was stoning them. I was, saying that they were blasphemers. I was basically trying to stop everything that Christ was doing in their life. I was doing this, I was doing that, He's starting his testimony saying, this is where I was. This is where, this was my before Christ days, before I met Jesus Christ. Like for me, I say a lot in my testimony, okay, I used to, get locked up, and I used to run the streets, and I used to go sleep around, and I used to do all those things, So you're starting his testimony off where this is where I used to be. This is where I once was. And sometimes, the power of a testimony can come from sharing where you once were to where you are now. People can say, he was basically saying up there, my manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion I lived a Pharisee. Everyone knew who he once was. They could testify against who he was, and they could testify against who he was now. So he started off with, there is witnesses who can sit there and tell you, this is who I once was. Okay, so that's where he started his testimony, and that, the power of a testimony can start with, okay, this is where I once was, but, and then it's going to continue on and talk about where he is now. So, or basically, where he got delivered. So we're going to talk about the place where he got delivered right after this. And so, that comes with having a strong testimony, is you talk about where you once were, where you delivered, and kind of like where you are now, So we're going to go into that after I put up the first few questions. All right, you guys? Peace. Where did you used to be versus where you are now? Are there people who can vouch for your change, or will they say that you're still the same? Okay, so next we're going to look at the place of deliverance in the testimony, and how you can talk about the place of deliverance in your testimony, because where you were, can be big, because if people know you from where you are now, they'd be like, oh, I would never guess. Because a lot of people, and a lot of time when people look at me and I'll be like, oh, I was like this, they'll be like, Jazz, really? You're kidding me, right? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm serious. So you can also talk about the place of deliverance, where you were when you got delivered. For me, I was sitting on the 28 bus from Boston, and it was the day before Valentine's Day. And basically what happened, I received Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And I hadn't believed, I did not believe in God. I always felt like, it was forced upon me. I felt like it was more of something on a to-do list. Like building a relationship with Jesus Christ should never be something you feel like you're forced to do. It should feel like something that you want to do. You can't make anybody love anybody. You can't force people to love you. You can't force people to want to be there. It has to be a relationship. It has to be two people wanting to walk together. And I didn't want to walk with God. I didn't feel like it was something that I wanted for my life. I didn't even believe in God. Like, my friends used to get so mad at me and say, you don't even believe in God? Like, no, because I just didn't feel like there were things in my life where it just made me so mad. Like, if there was a God, then why did my baby die? Or if there is a God, why doesn't my mother, can't my mother, stop doing what she's doing? Why can't my father stop doing what he's doing? Why does no one listen to me? Why do I feel this way? Like nothing, like no one understood. I was just outcasted. If there was a God, then why? And then, it has to be a point in a place where, for me, I was just at a point in a place where I was at rock bottom. And some people, they have to be at rock bottom to actually, come to Christ, to acknowledge his existence. Like the prodigal son, the prodigal son, his testimony, for his point of deliverance would be the fact that he could say, and this is what happened to me. We'll read it. We'll just go in there and read it. So the prodigal son could have said, okay, well, this is part of my testimony. This is my point of deliverance. This is the point where I was coming back to Christ, and I realized that I needed the Father. And I needed some type of change in my life. There has to come a point in our life where we decide that there needs to be some type of change in our lives other than what we are doing right now, so there's that deliverance part of your testimony. So this could be the power of his testimony. So he could say right here in verse 14 of Luke 15, it says, and when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to the citizen of the country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And when he would fain have filled his belly with husk, that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will rise and go to my father, and I will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against you and against heaven and before thee, and I am no longer worthy to be called thy son. Make me one of thy hired servants. So his place of deliverance. So basically, he could say, this is the part of my testimony where I am being delivered from the place where I was, when I realized that I really need the Father, when I really need God, that I really need Christ. There has to come to a point where you have to realize that you need this for your own life, your personal life. No one can pressure you into it. Nobody can want you to do it, because if you get pressured and cornered into it, then you're not going to want it for yourself. You know, as much as it was shoved down my throat growing up, I did not want it. You know, it is not something that I wanted. The second that I wanted it for myself is the second that I accepted it and I could build my own personal relationship. It wasn't something that someone could do. You know, it's like trying to force someone to be with somebody who doesn't want to be there. It's like, I don't want to be there. So basically, it says, so basically his testimony could say, so basically a famine came in my life. I was out there. I had spent all my money. I lived prodigal lifestyle. I was probably drinking, partying, living my life with prostitutes, hanging around, and then a bad famine had arose. I spent all my money. I had nothing left. And then all of a sudden, I joined the citizens of the countries, and it got so bad in my life that I was at a point of eating food with the pigs. Like, I got to the lows of the lows. You know, that is where my point of deliverance is. For me, it was the fact that I was in a relationship, I was being abusive, then he became physical because I was being physical, because I thought that that was the type of love, because that's the type of love that was given to me, so I gave it back. And so then I continued to go lower because he ended up leaving me. I was running in and out of my house, always smoking, always drinking, always partying constantly, always the next guy, sleeping with this guy, sleeping with that guy. I got to the lows of the lows. I was at a point where I was at rock bottom. And you have to get, you know, some people don't get to the point, but there has to be a point in your life that you get where you're just kind of quartered in and you feel like there's nowhere else to really turn, and you realize that you need some type of help somewhere and you can't get it from anywhere else. You know, like your parents can't give it to you. You know, I was at a point where when this all occurred, I told my grandmother nobody could help me. That means she couldn't help me, my mother couldn't help me, my dad couldn't help me, the system couldn't help me, no one could help me. And I don't care how many men I slept with, I don't care how many females I liked, I didn't care, you know, what the jail system tried to teach me. No pill, no nothing was going to help me from feeling what I felt. My mind, the thoughts in my mind constantly raced. I had racing thoughts all the time. I felt like, you know, like I don't know how to explain it, like mentally, like insane. Like I felt like I was going crazy. Like, the depression, the deep depression that I was in was like horrible. Like if I could express to you, like I felt like I lived with tears sitting in my eyes constantly and they never went away. Like I felt like I could constantly cry all day long, and it was like constant pressure in my eyes. Like I was so sick, so sad, like I couldn't even express to you. And then I gave my life to Christ, and I didn't feel like that anymore. Like no one could take that pain away from me. Like, and that was my point of where, when I did give my life to Christ, when I went to church after I went to Virginia, I heard God speak to me, and you know, he told the pastor to say out loud, from this day forth you will never be the same again. And from that day on, I was never the same again. There is the power in the testimony, the point of deliverance, the point that you realize that you need the Father, but you need it for yourself. You know, no one can have to get it for you. You have to want it for yourself. It's a personal thing, because it's a personal relationship with Christ, meaning my relationship will never be the same as your relationship with Christ. Just like if you have a relationship with a husband or a wife, it is personal. It's between you and that person. God helps me on my struggles, my personal struggles that probably no one ever knows or understands. No one's going to know them or understand them better than Christ, because he knows me inside and out. He knows everything that I've been through. There is a point of deliverance that has a power in a testimony. And so I'm going to put up the next few questions and we're going to carry on. All right, you guys? Peace. Have you had a point of deliverance? What is your point of deliverance? You know, the place when you realized that you needed Christ. Okay, so next thing we're going to look at is the power of a testimony when it comes to after, you've been delivered from the place where you are. People start talking because they're like, I cannot believe what just happened. Did you see what God did in her life? Like, it's not something that can just be kept quiet, like people want to talk about it because they're like, okay, she used to be this way. I know for me, there's people who are like, do you remember Jasmine back then and there? And then now, like, look at who she is now, like compared to then and now. Like people will talk about it. They'll talk about who you once were. Sometimes, like, the greatest testimony is to not even tell your testimony, but to live out your life because people are watching you. I know there are people who are constantly watching me. Like, for instance, the other day, I went out with some friends, and one of the people that I met had asked me, well, do you do drugs? And I said, no. Well, they asked me, well, do you drink? And I said, no. And so then, as time went on, they asked me, well, do you do drugs? And I said, no. Because they were watching me refuse these things, these liquor and these other things, because I don't do them. Because it's not something that I do. But they were watching. They were taking notice. They were watching my actions. Because for them, it was something that was not regular. Because probably people around them, that's what they do. But for me, it's something that I stray away from because I don't want any part of that anymore. That's not something that I want. People are watching your actions, and that's a big part of the power of a testimony, is seeing the changes in your life, seeing them, not just hearing them, because people can hear all the time and not believe, but if they see it for themselves, then they believe. Like seeing what's really happening, or hearing what is happening, hearing, oh my gosh, do you know what just happened to so-and-so's life? Because they hear about it. The other day, okay, I didn't want to spoil the news, but I'm going to put it in my update video, but I'm moving to Florida. I went to my friend's house the other day, and I was like, hey, do you know? I told my friend's dad, I'm like, hey, do you know I'm moving to Florida? Yeah, I already heard. I didn't relay the message to him. I hadn't even told him yet. I was telling him right now, but he had already heard. See, and people are always constantly talking. People talk. The message continues to spread, and that's the power of a testimony. It will spread. People will talk about, oh, do you know about this? Or do you know about that? Because that's what people do. They talk. People like to talk, okay? I know. I know. That's why I like it. Sometimes it's really hard for me because I feel like people are constantly watching me, that I don't even want to like be around people, because it's like, can I just get a breather, a point to myself where I can just relax? Because some people try to hold you as high as Jesus, and I'm a person, a human being, and I need my sins forgiven just like everybody else. And I'm not perfect. Lord have mercy, and it kills me. All right. So here we go. So we're going to look in Matthew chapter 8, and it says, so basically Jesus meets with this man who is possessed with demons, but in this chapter it says 2. So it says in verse 28, and when he was come to the other side, unto the country of, I can never say that. There he met 2 possessed with devils, coming out of the tombs exceedingly fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. And behold, they cried out, saying, what have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? And there was a good way off from them a herd of many swines feeding. So the devils besought him, saying, If thou cast us out, suffer us to go away unto the herd of swine. And he said unto them, Go. And when they were come out, they went unto the herd of swines, and behold, the whole herd of swines ran violently down a steep place into the sea, and perished in the waters. And they that went them fled and went their ways into the city, and told everything and what was befallen to the possessed of the devils. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they besought him that he would depart out of their coast. But it says right there, and they that kept them fled and went their ways into the city, and told everything and what was befallen unto the possessed of the devils. So basically, they saw what Jesus had done with the men who were possessed with the devils, and the men who were they went into the city and told everything, meaning they didn't leave out any detail. This is what happened. You know what happened to so and so? You know what God is doing in their life, and they just want to be so nosy and know everything that's going on. And so, oh, really? That's what God's doing in so and so's life? Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, well, maybe I want to try out that God. Oh, okay, God can do that for me? Christ can do that for me? Well, right here, it seems like they were a little scared because, because, look, it says, the people were filled with devils, and then all of a sudden their devils are gone. And they probably, couldn't even help the people who were demon possessed, but Jesus could do it. I know, for me, and probably when I talk about my testimony all the time, I talk about how medication couldn't do it, or the doctors couldn't do it, the jail couldn't do it. It makes, I remember I went to the doctors last year and I told her I didn't want medication, and because I don't want to get my healing, and people would be like, oh, it was the meds. And so my doctor was getting kind of frustrated because she wanted me to take the medication, and I'm like, I'm not taking it, so you could say that your little pill healed me. It's not the pill, it's Christ. I'm not going to sit there and let you say that your little pill did the job, because I'm not going to let your little pill, do the job. I'm gonna let Jesus do it, and so people get upset because they can't do what Christ can do. They can't heal like Christ can heal. They can't play Christ, and in a lot of society they try to play God, but they can't play God. They can try to force you to do what it is. When you think about the woman with the issue of blood in the next chapter, it says she went to every physician, she went to every doctor, she went to everything, and no one could heal her. No med, no doctor, no counselor, no nothing. And nothing worked but Christ. Imagine how dumb everybody felt because they couldn't do it, but only Jesus could do it. Only Jesus, when about last year it was, or whenever I decided to first go on my journey and realized that I needed God to change some things in my life, if I wanted certain things in my life, I sat on the phone and I said, I don't want any counselors, I don't want any drugs, I don't want any programs, I don't want nothing. Because I knew what I said earlier in my testimony, when I said to my grandmother, no one can help me, I tried everything. Nothing could help me. So why would I want to go back to doing something that didn't help me before? It didn't help me before. So why would I want to go back to it? I knew that the day that I gave my life to Christ, my depression went away. Something that I suffered with for years went away. So why wouldn't he be able to do what it is that I needed him to do again? And that's what he did. That's what he did. He healed me, and people talk about it. They will talk about it, and they will continue to talk about it. It spreads like wildfire. You never know whose life you're affecting by just living out your life and allowing them to see you walk with God and see the things that God is doing in your life. And so sometimes you just have to keep walking on your journey with Christ and allow them to see you go through some struggles, but walk through it with God. Because I've gone through struggles, with walking through God this year that have been really sad and really depressing, to a point where if it was old me, like, I probably would have slit my wrist, drank my life away. Like, I was really, really at a point of really, like, in a deep, deep sadness, like, to a point where I had stopped myself from crying for some time, because I'm like, I'm not going to cry. Like, I was at a serious, like, crying every single night, crying every single day, like, and no one really saw it, but, I kept walking with God. I should have gone back to living my own lifestyle, because I have been really sad. Like, since Christmas of last year, like, not the year that just passed, but the year before then, like, I have been disgustingly sad, and I should have gone back to my old lifestyle and just, completely started living that same way again, because I literally have been so upset. But I have been reading my Bible and keeping my eye on God and trying to focus on what God was saying to me versus what people were saying, because of the way things looked. And because of that, I kept my eye on God, and you just keep moving, and people watch that. Why didn't she go back to, like, I went through probably one of the worst breakups of my life, because I really cared about someone, and it, like, literally ate me up inside, but I kept it moving. And I usually, like, I go bounce from man to man to man, and guy to guy, but I didn't do that. Or, I get so upset. Like, I remember my freshman year, my junior year, I went through some stuff where I walked in on someone with another girl, and I cut off all my hair. But this time I didn't do those things in which it is that I did. I just kept living my life, trusting God and believing God for, I wrote a book, and, after that, Dear God, I'm letting go, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do, and I was in pain, and no one was going to help me. Everyone was just looking at me like, oh, Jasmine's going to get over it and just go to the next guy, because that's what she does. But no one consoled me. No one cared about my issue or my problem. People don't care. So, like, you just keep walking with God and trusting God and believing God for, what he's saying to you, so you don't go back, so you don't, do things that you once did. Because I honestly, like, it's been hard, trying to get up day to day, trusting God, walking to work every day. Now I have a car. I'm moving to Florida next Tuesday. Like, it's been hard trying to trust and believe God through this whole process. But people watch you as you go through life. And if you just continue listening to God's word and trusting and believing that he's going to do something, they'll see the changes that he's making in your life. You don't have to. That's one thing about a testimony. Your testimony will speak for you. You don't have to speak for your testimony. So I'm going to put the last few questions, and I may put a little comment thing at the end. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and tuning me in. All right, guys? Peace. Does your testimony speak for you? Do you pay attention to people watching your life and what God is doing for you?